to my human brothers and sisters. Superiority. This word, in almost every culture, refers to a united, well-functioning, and prosperous community. The American implication of this word characterizes superiority as conquering, power, and control. This word has created a country, and it has created silence. Silence is injustice. Silence is destruction of a culture. Silence is segregation. Silence is oppression. Silence is power. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. We all recall the skewed history lessons that we were taught as children. During the early colonization period, it was common belief that Caucasians were superior to the indigenous people. Native Americans were said to be less than human, savages. Never taking the time to understand these people led to misconceptions, enforced relocation, and killing of millions of people. How did the country respond to this injustice? Silence. Dr. King states, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." 1619. The first African slaves entered America. They were stripped from their land, their language, and their culture. Men, women, and children were said to be more like apes than humans. Just look at the literature of the day. The Negro's cross-section of the chest is more circular than whites, similar to an ape. The dehumanization of these people resulted in over 200 years of treating humans like property. 200 years of attempting to brainwash these Africans with American culture. On December 18th, 1865, slavery was made illegal in the United States. What was said of this destruction of culture? Silence. Dr. King says, "The Negro is a child of two cultures, African and American. The problem is that in the search for wholeness, all too many Negroes seek to embrace only one of their sides of their nature." Slavery ended, but African Americans were still far from being free. Immediately following, the country responded with an attempt to destroy a race. Mass incarceration, destroying families and placing humans in cages. Segregation, making blacks second-class citizens. Separating races not only created misconception, additionally created no understanding of black culture. The media was controlled entirely by white people, giving blacks no voice. What was said of this segregation? Silence. Brother King responded, "Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice." December 4th, 1906, there was silence on the streets of Ithaca, New York. 7 men ended this silence. They responded to the question, "Where do we go from here?" with a mission statement. Alpha Phi Alpha, Fraternity Incorporated, develops leaders, promotes brotherhood and academic excellence while providing service and advocacy for our communities. This brotherhood is why I refuse to be silent. This brotherhood is what connects my answer to this question with Dr. King's. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. accomplished so much in the civil rights movement. He combated hatred with love. However, his efforts were not enough. Blacks were still treated as less. Americans' minds were still filled with ignorance and hearts full of hate. Blacks in America were economically, socially, and culturally oppressed. What did you hear as a result of this oppression? Silence. Dr. King tells us that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Just last week, 17 kids were killed in a Florida school shooting. Since this shooting, more than 17 people have been shot and killed in the streets of Chicago. Today, we live in a society of corruption and greed. Our government is powerless under the control of the wealthy. We have a broken educational, judicial, and healthcare systems. Those in power refuse to empower others. What is the outcry telling of this abuse of power? Silence. Dr. King said, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. Justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love." Where do we go from here? We must recognize that we are all brothers and sisters in the human family. We must empower everyone in our communities to use their voices and refuse to be silent today. In the words of my brother, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but we will remember the silence of our friends. Thank you.